AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. We have talked a lot of recent days about MWAA, the Washington Metropolitan Airport Authority. They're responsible for monitoring the construction of the Silver Line out to Dulles, and there have been some other reporting in some of the newspapers about how they've been spending taxpayer dollars. We really do appreciate that John Potter, who's the CEO of MWAA, has agreed to come on the show and talk to us about some of this. John, you're a former Postmaster General. Do you prefer to be called Jack? John? I'm sorry, John, there you are. Do you prefer to be called Jack?
Yes, I do, Brian.
Okay,
Thank you.
Then Jack Potter is with us now from MWAA. Let me start out. We'll get to the Silver Line in just a moment, but let me ask you a couple of questions about some of the spending habits at MWAA. There have been some reporting that suggests that some 2/3 of the contracts over $200,000 between the years 2009 and 2011 were no competition bids, no competition contracts. And then there's been another round of stories about a guy named Gregory Shea, who you've paid $173,000 to over a number of years to hold seminars. And basically, it comes down that his hourly rate is something like $7,000 an hour to do conflict resolution seminars. And when you hear these kind of things, a lot of people say, is that a real good expenditure of taxpayer dollars?
Well, first, let me say that we do not spend taxpayer dollars. All revenues that are generated for aviation use by the airports come from the airlines, come from the fees that passengers pay for parking, concessions, etc. Secondly, the reports about $7,000 are grossly inaccurate. The bottom line, there was a contract let back in 2010, a 3-year contract that had Greg Shea providing a number of services to the authority, including coaching of the then chairman and help with retreats as the board sought to address some internal conflicts. So those numbers are grossly inaccurate. However, the bottom line here is that we have new leadership, and myself, as well as a new chairman, and we are very aggressively dealing with all the issues that you're hearing about, and when it comes to spend. The bottom line is, if you look at just the last year, that spend has been brought under control and will continue to be brought under control. The board is revisiting all of its policies, and we'll be making changes in policies to assure that every dollar spent here is well spent.
I want to just correct one thing, or get a clarification on one thing. You talk about airport monies, that you say that's not taxpayer money, but when you talk about the Silver Line to Dulles, there is taxpayer money there, is there not?
Right, but the money that we're talking about came from the aviation fund. There's a firewall between the Silver Line and the aviation operation that we're responsible for.
And this idea that you let a lot of contracts without having to ask for bids?
Well, again, that's a bit of an injustice. We're working with the Department of Transportation, IG, to better characterize that. So let me just talk a little bit about some of the contracts that are there that they call sole source. We have a Council of Governments group here in the Washington area. Over 50 government entities participate. When one entity enters into a contract that is deemed favorable, other entities can use or access that contract to get favorable prices. So as an example, Fairfax County bought some buses. The airport authority had to go buy buses. We used the Fairfax contract, which was competed to buy buses. It was a much better price than we could go out and get on the marketplace because we were buying fewer buses. We also have a lot of contracts between us and airlines, and I'll give you an example. When they bring new service to the airport, we enter into a contract to join with them to promote that new service at either Dulles or at Reagan. Those are sole source contracts, but in effect, that's the only entity that you can do business with. We also have numerous things where we have radios, an example, where there's proprietary language on that radio. So when it comes to making software changes, you're forced into a sole source situation. Now, that said, there are opportunities for us to tighten up our use of sole source contracting. That's one of the policies that the board is going to take a look at, and we're in the process of making those restrictions. But I think it would be unfair to expect that an entity like ours is ever going to get to a situation where we have no sole source contract.
So are you saying that the article in the Washington Examiner about how much Gregory Shea was paid is wrong, that he was...
It's grossly overstated. They basically...
they quote authority documents that say that he was paid that much money.
$173,000 over 3 years.
Right.
And then there was another contract
but if I could explain
for $883,000 for a reorganizational step.
We'll let you explain it. Go ahead.
Well, let me explain the Greg Shea contract. The bottom line is what they did was they said there were 3 retreats. They assumed there were 8 hours, of work around those retreats, and they took $173,000 and divided by 24, and they came up with a number. The bottom line is.
So you're saying he did
this radio show? I mean,
right.
you do prep work.
Right.
The man had to do a lot of prep work.
Okay.
He was doing coaching. He had other assignments.
So it's a $7,000 per hour is what you question, not necessarily the $173,000.
No, not questioning the $173,000.
Okay.
That was spent, but the $7,000 an hour was
gotcha.
a gross miscalculation.
All right. We don't have a lot of time left, so I want to ask you about the Silver Line. Loudoun County still hasn't voted yet whether or not they're going to actually fund their portion of this. If there is no funding from Loudoun County, what happens to this project?
Well, if by contract the parties go back to the table to decide whether or not we would continue on with a phase 2 of the project, I can tell you that both MWAA and Fairfax County are very interested in continuing, but it would cause at least an 18-month delay because we would have to review ridership at each of the phase 2 stations. The assumption that the 606 and 772 riders would simply stay in their cars is not accurate. We anticipate that there would be, additional demand at the phase 2 stations, which would cause additional parking lot requirements, as well as bus service. Bus service that is planned for 606 and 772 would obviously move to other phase 2 stations.
Would you have to increase tolls on the Dulles Toll Road?
No. It actually, it depends on what the escalation costs are, but in round numbers, the additional mileage to go out to 606 and the construction of the station at 606 and 772 will cost the project $580 million. The contribution from the county is $280 million. So literally, $580 million in costs will be taken out, $280 million in capital will be subtracted. So in theory, there would be a net benefit of $300 million. However, the big problem here is that we would face escalating costs. I mean, right now is the best time that you could have to go out with a construction contract because of the economy. Now is the best time that you could borrow money because of low interest rates.
Well, we'll have to leave it right there, Mr. Potter. But we really do thank you for coming on.
Well, and I'm very hopeful that Loudoun County will opt in for this project. It's a very important one for the region, and the airports are going to work very hard to continue to make a contribution to the economic development and vitality of the area.
All right, Jack Potter with MWAA. Thank you for joining us on